any kind of a sharper downturn, which we haven't seen any evidence of at all. At the same time, policy is still in a place where it's not accommodative, and we feel like we have made progress this year in non-tariff related inflation, and as tariffs come through, as they flow through, that'll show through next year. But as I said, we're well placed to wait and see how that turns out. That is our expectation, but we're going to start to see the data, and it'll tell us whether we were right or not.
Claire Jones, Financial Times. A lot of people interpreted your comments at the October meeting that when there's a foggy situation, we slow down, to mean that there wouldn't be a cut now, there'd be a cut in January instead. So it'd be good to get a sense of why did the committee decide to move today rather than to move in January instead? Thank you.
Right. So in October, I said that there was no certainty of moving, and that was indeed correct. I said it's possible you could think about it that way, but I was careful to say other people could look at it differently. So why did we move today? I would say point to a couple things. First of all, gradual cooling in the labor market has continued. Unemployment is now up 0.3 from June through September. Payroll jobs averaging 40,000
لیبر مارکت یا بازار کار میچرخه تمامش. خب پرسنت بایمون از 95 گذاشتیم.
Per month. And also, just to point out, surveys of households and businesses both show declining supply and demand for workers. So I think you can say that the labor market has continued to cool gradually, maybe just a touch more gradually than we thought. In terms of inflation, it's come in a touch lower, and I think the evidence is kind of growing that what's happening here is services inflation coming down, and that's offset by increases in goods, and that goods inflation is entirely in sectors where there are tariffs. So that does build on the story, and so far it's only a story, that that the goods inflation, which is really the source of the excess at this point, that almost more than half the source of the excess inflation is goods, is tariffs. And you've got to say then, so what do we expect from tariffs? And I would say that is to some extent down to looking for broader economic do we see a hot economy? Do we see constraints? Do we see
دیگه داره صحبت‌ها میره به سمت چیز داریم به آخر میرسیم.
It doesn't feel like a hot economy that wants to generate, Phillips curve kind of inflation. So we look at all those things, and we say that this was a decision to make. It obviously wasn't unanimous, but overall that was the judgment that we made, and that's the action we took.
Just on the ample reserves point, how concerned were people around the table about some of the tensions we've seen in money markets? Thank you.
I wouldn't say concerned. So what really happened is this. Balance sheet shrinkage, sometimes called QT, went on. We had a framework in place for monitoring it, and nothing happened. The overnight reverse repo facility went down pretty much close to zero. And then beginning in September, the federal funds rate started to tick up within the range, right? And it ticked up almost all the way to interest-on reserve balances. There's nothing wrong with that. What that's telling you is that we're actually in an ample reserves regime. So, we knew this was going to come. When it finally did come, it came a little quicker than expected, but we were absolutely there to take the actions that we said we would take. So, and those actions are today. So, we announced that we're resuming reserve management purchases. That is completely separate from monetary policy. It's just we need to keep an ample supply of reserves out there. Why so big? The answer to that is, if you look ahead, you'll see that April 15th is coming up, and our framework is such that we want to have ample reserves even at times when reserves are at a low level temporarily. So that's what happens on tax day. People pay a lot of money to the government, reserves drop sharply and temporarily. So this seasonal buildup that we'll see in the next few months is going to happen anyway. It was going to happen because April 15th is April 15th. There's also secular ongoing growth of the balance sheet. We have to keep reserves, call it constant as it relates to the banking system or to the whole economy. And that alone calls for us to increase about 20-25
استاپتون رو یه دونه ریسک داشته باشین، یه دونه استاپ روی پایین این کندل 5203 صحبتای این تموم بشه احتمال داره که مارکت اصلاح بده.
To get reserves high enough to get through the tax period in mid-April. So that's what's happening there.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. This is the last post-FOMC press conference before an important Supreme Court hearing next month. Can you talk about how you're hoping the Supreme Court will rule?
آخرین کانفرنسی که در سال 2025 هستش. بعد بگه تاثیرش روی سیاست‌های مالی شما تو سال 2025 چیه؟
We're not legal commentators.
به عنوان آخرین کانفرنس که احساس می‌کنید نتیجه خوبی گرفتید قبل از دادگاه که کورت منظورش همون کورتی که می‌خواد تغییر بکنه چون می‌تونه دیگه عوض بشه.
No, thanks. I don't know if that means I get 3 questions, but
just one more.
I guess I wanted to come back to the 1990s question, and like, do you see that as a useful model for thinking about what is happening in the economy right now?
I don't think it rises to that level. So I did think that in 2000 and was it 19 where we cut 3 times.
کشت.
You know, this is such a unique
اقتصاد
situation.
امریکا رو کشت. الان ببینید چجوری اون فرش که دادم رفت بالا کشت با این حرفش. دقیقاً دارن برمیگردن به سال 990 و 998 این 6-7 سال میگن نرخ بهره داشته افزایش پیدا می‌کرده وضعیت همین وضعیت بوده چطوری تو همین وضعیت لیبر وحشتناک‌تر داره نرخ بهره کاهش پیدا می‌کنه و کشت هم پاول کشت هم پاول اقتصاد کشت.
Each of them back to the goal. That's a very subjective analysis, really. But it just tells you you've got to, and I think ultimately what it says is when they're broadly equally threatened or equally at risk, you should be kind of neutral. Because if you're either accommodative or tight, you're favoring one or the other goal. And so we've been sort of moving in the direction of neutral. Now we're in the range of neutral. We're in the high end of the range of neutral, I would say. And that's what we're doing now. It so happened that we've cut 3 times. That, you know, we haven't made any decision about January, but as I've said, we think we're well positioned to wait and see how the economy performs.
Edward.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Edward Lawrence with Fox Business. I wanted to ask you, the inflation expectations has come down in your SEP report. Do you see the tariff price increases as passing through in the next 3 months? Is it a 6-month process that we're looking for that to end? And then because of that, is jobs.
So with tariff inflation, there's the announcement of a tariff, and then there's, you know, they start to take effect, and then it takes some months. Goods may have to be shipped from other parts of the, you know, it may take quite a while for an individual.
ببینید الان چقدر خوشگل برمیگرده این سطح رو جمع میکنه و میاد بالا اصلا فرصت
isn't that just a one-time price increase? So
fuse price
we actually look at it, all of the announcements and what you get from all that. You see sort of for each one of them, there's a time period, and then it's fully in. So if there are no new tariff announcements, and we don't know that, but let's assume there are no major new tariff announcements, inflation from goods should peak in the first quarter or so, right, or roughly.
Is going to bring down the yield on the thing that will move the economy the most.
So we're looking at the real economy and focusing on that. And you've got when the long bonds move around, you've got to look at why they're moving around. If you look at inflation compensation, it's very that's one part of it is inflation compensation break-evens. And, you know, they're at very comfortable levels. They're at levels consistent. Once you get out past the very short term now, break-evens are at at quite levels that are quite consistent with 2% inflation over time. So there's nothing happening with rates going up out there that suggests concern about inflation in the long term or anything like that. I mean, I look at these things pretty regularly. Same thing with surveys. Surveys are all saying that the public understands our commitment to 2% and expects us to get back there. So why are rates going up? It has to be something else. It must be, you know, an expectation of higher growth or something like that. And that's a lot of what's been going on. I mean, you saw a big move, you know, toward the end of last year, which was not to do with us. It was to do with other developments.
Well, you just mentioned that the public is expecting you to get back to 2%, and Americans overwhelmingly are citing high prices, inflation as their number one concern. Can you explain to them why you're prioritizing the labor market, which seems relatively stable to most people?
همه صحبت‌ها قبل از لایو بهتون گفتم همه صحبت‌ها سمت نیروی کاره.
We have a network of contacts in the U.S. economy, which is really unmatched if you go through the 12 reserve banks. So we hear loud and clear how people are experiencing really high costs. And a lot of that is not the current rate of inflation. A lot of that is just embedded higher cost due to higher inflation in 2022 and 23. So that's what's going on. And so the best thing we can do is restore inflation to its 2% goal, and our policy is intended to do that, but also have a strong economy where real wages are going up, where people are getting jobs and earning money, and we're going to need to have some years where real compensation is higher, you know, it's positive, significantly positive, so nominal wages are higher than inflation, for people to start feeling good about the affordability issue. And, you know, so we're working hard on that. We're trying to keep inflation under control, but also support the labor market and strong wages so that people are earning enough money and feeling economically healthy again.
Victoria.
Hi, Victoria Guida with Politico. Just to follow up on that, I mean, this is now the third time that you've cut this year and inflation is around 3%. So is the message that you're sort of trying to send with that?
Actionfigur original verpackt.
Everyone should understand, and the surveys show that they do, that we're committed to 2% inflation and we will deliver 2% inflation. But it's a complicated, unusual, difficult situation where the labor market is also under pressure, where job creation may actually be negative. Now, supply of workers has also gone way down, so the unemployment rate hasn't moved that much. But you know, it's a labor market that seems to have significant downside risks. People care a lot about that. That's their jobs. That's their ability, if they get laid off or if they're entering the labor force, to find work. So that's really important to people. The story with inflation, and you know, we're well aware that this is a story at this point, is that if you get away from tariffs, inflation is in the low 2s, right? So it's really tariffs that's causing most of the inflation overshoot. And we do think of those as likely to, in the current situation, as likely to be a one-time price increase. Our job is to make sure that it is, and we will do that job. But right now, you've got this difficult balance, and there are risks to both sides. There's no risk-free path. If it was just inflation and the labor market was just really strong, and then rates would be higher, as they were for more than a year. You know, we didn't have to worry about inflation. Sorry about the labor market. Because the unemployment was very low. If you remember when inflation was very high, there was a labor shortage, so we could focus entirely on inflation. Now it's different. We actually have risks to both, and I think we're doing the best we can for people. They also care about their jobs. They do care about affordability, and the best thing we can do there is both to support economic activity, but also, you know, make sure that when tariff inflation goes down and disappears, inflation lands around 2%.
Elizabeth.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth Schulze with ABC News. Just to follow up, you keep talking about job growth being negative. Why do you think
ABC News Trump خیلی تو زاویه است برعکسش پاول خیلی اوکی.
Follow up on your comments about job growth. Why is it so much worse than the official data is suggesting?
Oh well, we know. I think I don't think this is particularly controversial. It's very difficult to estimate job growth in real time. They don't count everybody. They have a survey.
گفتم این ABC نیوز به شدت زاویه داره با اینا و سوالش هم همین بودش که چقدر دولت روی شاخص سازی تاثیر گذاشته. میگه خیلی سخته که بتونی خیلی دقیق استیمیت بکنی، مشخص بکنی اون میزان پیشرفت. ممکنه یه جاهایی اشتباهات اتفاق بیفته، ولی ما کاملا روی این قضیه مشرف هستیم و سازمان‌هایی که دارن به این قضیه رسیدگی میکنن به لحاظ آمارسنجی کارشون درست انجام. این ببینید چقدر قشنگ داره میگه مثلا فورکست ها و پیش بینی ها
could be wrong by
چقدر قشنگ لیگ دوم داره جمع میکنه بچه‌ها.
But the thing is that's job creation in a way. That's demand. Labor supply has also come down quite sharply. So, you know, if you had a world where there's just no growth in workers and you really don't need a lot of jobs to have full employment, some people argue
کل لیگ اولی که گفتم اومد، لیگ دوم هم داره پر میکنه. 260 پیپ یادتون باشه تو لایو براتون گذاشتم.
You know, pushing down on job creation with our policy.
نوش جونتون. اگه گرفتید نوش جونتون.
We have seen major American employers like Amazon cite AI in job cuts. How much right now are you factoring in AI into
من این صحبتاش که تموم بشه اینو سیو میکنم بچه‌ها ببینن و بعدش میرم تو تلگرام توی ربات که سیگنال میذارم. چون به نظرم مارکت میتونه محدوده 240 برگشت داشته باشه. یه اصلاح کوچیک.
saying that they're not going to hire anybody for a long time and they cite AI. That's all clearly happening. At the same time, people are not filing for unemployment insurance, and since job creation, job finding rates are extremely low. If there were big numbers of layoffs, you'd expect the continuing claims to go up, and you'd expect new claims to go up. But really haven't much, so it's a little bit curious. Longer term, though, you know, the question is, what are we going to see here? And we don't know, but it may be that in past technology, really significant technology innovation eras, you have seen some jobs destroyed and other jobs made. Ultimately, what's happened for a couple hundred years is when you get through all that, you have higher productivity and you have new jobs and there are enough jobs for people. This may be different. You know, it's every time we have a wave of technology, we think, oh, this could put a lot of people out of work. What are they going to do? In the past, there's always been more work and higher productivity, and incomes have risen. What will happen here?
As 95
right now, it's such early days. We don't think we see much. It's certainly not showing up.
همین الان بچه‌ها 320.
Thank you, Chair. And the current Bloomberg News.
given the breadth of views on the policy committee, why is there such a division of views between
من تصویرم ببرم و یه
why is
سموکی
there such a
بکنم.
division of views between the presidents and the board members?
You know, it's not so stark as that. The views are more varied in each group as well. There's some of that, but I would say they're also governors and they're people on both sides in both groups. I wouldn't put too much in that.
Okay, and just a follow-up, please. Given your growth upgrade, how would you factor in, or what would be the economic impact if the Supreme Court is to strike down the tariffs that they're currently hearing, please, in terms of growth and inflation? Thank you.
I really don't know. It would depend. It would depend on a whole bunch of things we don't know. So I can't really help you there.
Christine.
خیلی بله رئیس خزانه داری فدرال امیدوار باشه به اینکه دو تا گروه در رابطه با بحث تعرفه‌ها با هم به توافق برسن. دو تا گروه داخلی، جمهوری‌خواه و دموکرات. خیلی شکاف بدی افتاده تو دولت. پنج ساله که توی امریکا قیمت‌ها داره مدام افزایش پیدا می‌کنه، تورم شدیده. 5 ساله.
Through our vast network of
از اول جنگ
just
روسیه و
our
اوکراین.
observation of what's going on in the economy, we hear about this a lot. If you listen to the earnings reports for consumer-facing companies that tend to deal with low and moderate income people, they'll all say that we're seeing people, tightening their belts, changing products that they buy, buying less, and that sort of thing. And so it's clearly a thing. It's also clearly a thing that, asset values, housing values, and securities values are high, and they tend to be owned by people more at the higher end of the income and wealth. So as how sustainable it is, I don't know. Most of the consumption does happen by people who have more means. I think, the top third accounts for way more than a third of the consumption, for example. So it's a good question how sustainable that is. The best we got to have price stability, and we got to have full employment, maximum employment.
And just quickly, you mentioned the housing market remains kind of weak. With these rate cuts that we've seen, is there a chance we're going to see more affordability in the housing market so more people can maybe enjoy that part of wealth creation? I mean, the average age or median age of a first-time home buyer is now 40 years old. That's the highest on record.
Yeah, so the housing market faces some really significant challenges. And I don't know that, a 25 basis point decline in the federal funds rate is going to make much of a difference for people. Housing supply is low. Many people have very, very low rate mortgages from the pandemic period, and they kept refinancing and got the really low. So it's made it expensive for them to move, and we're a ways away from that changing. Also, we haven't built enough housing in the country for a long time, and so a lot of estimates suggest that we just need more housing of different kinds. So housing is going to be a problem, and really the tools to address it are we can raise and lower interest rates, but we don't really have the tools to address a secular housing shortage, a structural housing shortage.
Chris.
Thanks. Chris Rugaber, Associated Press. You mentioned on inflation, services inflation being low, goods inflation looking like maybe it'll peak. We had the wages report you mentioned today showing moderating wage growth. Where are there inflation risks? It looks like inflation is cooling. In your view, at the same time, you have potentially negative hiring. Why not? Why aren't we hearing more about maybe more cuts in this environment?
Well, I think the risk inflation is pretty
این
clear to see.
مهمه. گفت چقدر باید منتظر ریت کات بیشتری باشیم با توجه به فضایی که ایجاد شده.
Most of the inflation over target is from goods.
منم بیام دیگه.
And we expect most
بچه
of us
پوزیشن کدوم برنشون
that inflation will be a one-time price increase.
پوزیشن رو ببینین 350
experience where inflation turned out to be much more persistent than
لایو هم بهتون گفتم که ایمیل میشه براتون برای بچه‌هایی که اونجا تایید دادن و تایید گرفتن تو ربات لینک لایو ارسال شده وقتی تموم میشه برای بقیه هم میذاریم. این فرق بین بچه‌هایی که تایید گرفتن و بچه‌هایی که تایید نگرفتن. یعنی از این بعد هر کی که همراهمون باشه حواسش به ما باشه ما هم حواسمون بهش هست.
Just traditional inflation. I don't see that as particularly likely, but so I think again all across the committee people see the
editation
Chair Powell, Neil Irwin with Axios. So this has come up a couple of times today, but to be clear, do you believe that we're experiencing a positive productivity shock, whether from AI or policy factors or whatever? And how much of that is driving the higher GDP projection in the SEP?
رسید دیگه بچه عملا من سقفی که براتون گذاشته بودم 41 42 بود از 4238 داره ریاکشنشو نشون میده. این محدوده مهمیه.
I also think if you look at what AI can do and if you use it in your personal life, as I imagine many of us have, you can see the
فروختن خلاف جهت همونجا ممکنه کارکشنی بهتون بده خیلی کوچولو $10.
Make other people have to find other jobs though. So it could have productivity implications while also having, you know, social and labor market implications that we don't have the tools to deal with. But yes, I think we're definitely seeing higher productivity. I think it's a little quick to be saying it's generative AI, but I don't know. You know, the pandemic may have induced people to do more automation and do more things with computers to replace people, and that raises productivity.
نقش هوش مصنوعی رو تولیدات داره صحبت
می‌کنه. All things equal, yes, but all things aren't equal. There are many things pushing in different directions on where the neutral rate would be. But yes, that argument does come up.
Matt Egan.
Thanks, Chair Powell. Matt Egan with CNN. After today, you only have 3 more meetings at the helm of the Fed. Since becoming Fed chair, you've seen multiple trade wars, the pandemic, COVID reopening, period of high inflation. I know your term's not up as chair until May. I'm wondering if you've given any thought to what you want your legacy to be.
My legacy. My thought is that I really want to turn this job over to whoever replaces me with the economy in really good shape. That's what I want to do. I want inflation to be under control, come back down 2%, and I want the labor market to be strong. That's what I want.
با چه چیزایی رو
all of my efforts are to get to that place. They have been all along, but ultimately, that's what and it's, you know, I don't have time to think about bigger things. I hope many years ahead to worry about that, but
have you given any more thought, and can you tell us any more about your plans on whether or not you plan to stay on the Fed Board of Governors even after your term as chair expires?
Again, I'm focused on my remaining time as chair. I haven't got anything new on that to tell you.
Go to Mark for the last question.
Chairman Mark Hamrick with Bankrate. Even while many price levels remain elevated, the reductions in the federal funds rate means that savings rates, or yields to be more precise, have peaked, while key borrowing rates remain elevated. And that's, as we've discussed here, as many Americans struggle with liquidity or emergency savings challenges. Is that just collateral damage or an unintended consequence because your tools are limited in addressing individual or household liquidity constraints, insufficient money in the bank?
I don't know. I wouldn't agree that that's collateral damage of our. I mean, over time, we do what we do in order to create price stability.
ولی راجع به لگسی یا همون میراثش توی فدرال رزرو حرف جالبی زد. من بعداً راجع بهش طولانی رو شاید وایس گذاشتم. واقعا کار سختی کرد. هر کسی دیگه جای جان پاول بود. بچه‌ای که از قبل یادشونه خب برنانکی بود قبلش. اصلا تسلط پاول رو نداشت.
That's what we're trying to do, and I would want people to understand that. I think what people are feeling is the effect of higher prices. There was a global wave, sort of every large economy in the world, sort of every large open economy, market-based economy in the world had a wave of inflation that looked an awful lot like ours. We actually came through better than any other country, substantially better. We had higher growth, we had better labor market, and this is really due to the American economy. We have an extraordinary economy, and you know, people are innovative, they work hard, and so, you know, all of us who work in economics jobs are really fortunate to have the U.S. economy. So, thank you very much.
تمام شد بچه‌ها. من حالا تو تحلیل کلیم رو براتون میذارم.